And what's tonight on TV, radio and online, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, it's author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 4 o'clock. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. Lancashire police say a body has been found in the River Wyre. They've been searching for Nicola Bulley, who disappeared from the area more than 3 weeks ago. Police say they can't yet confirm if the body is that of the missing mother of two, and they're working on formal identification. They're currently treating the death as unexplained and say her family has been informed of the latest developments. A cabinet minister says Boris Johnson's intervention on the Northern Ireland Protocol is not unhelpful because there's still plenty of work to be done. Mr Johnson's warning that scrapping the bill would be a great mistake comes the day after Rishi Sunak and the European Commission president said they'd made very good progress on fixing problems with the post-Brexit trading arrangements. The protocol bill introduced under Johnson gives the UK the right to ignore EU rules, and the leader of the House of Commons, Penny Mordaunt, believes that gives the government a stronger bargaining position.
I think, it's helpful to remind the EU that we have the Northern Ireland Protocol bill. It's helpful to remind them what those expectations are. But I would also just say that, look, there are encouraging signs. There is, people are saying there's a lot more to do, but progress is being made.
Political commentator Dr John Coulter says Mr Johnson's intervention on Brexit, his first since leaving office, could have serious ramifications.
Solving the protocol deal in Northern Ireland will guarantee the security of the peace process for, I would say, the next generation. Now, what Boris has done is really thrown a Trojan horse into the political negotiations here. Originally, the protocol was always seen as the European Union punishing the UK for daring to democratically vote to leave the European Union. So we've got to get a solution to the protocol.
Sir Keir Starmer says under no circumstances will Labour do a deal with the SNP. Addressing a party conference in Edinburgh, he urged Scottish voters to put their faith in Labour in the wake of Nicola Sturgeon's resignation. Sir Keir says he can bring the change Scotland needs, and the tide is turning on the Tories and the SNP.
Over 15 years in power, and what do they have to show for it? Honestly, it's always somebody else's fault. And the reason is simple. They're not truly invested in Scotland's success. Anything Scotland achieves within the UK is met with gritted teeth, seen as a roadblock to the one true goal. Whatever happens in the coming months, my message is the same. No deal under any circumstances.
Meanwhile, Scottish Health Secretary Humza Yousaf and former Minister Ash Regan have announced they're in the race to replace Nicola Sturgeon as SNP leader. Revealing their plans in the Sunday Mail, they're the first to declare their candidacy for the contest. Environment Minister Mhairi McCallan has now said she's not standing, but it's still thought Finance Secretary Kate Forbes could be a contender. Nominations close next Friday, and the winner will be announced at the end of March. The US Secretary of State has warned China will face serious consequences if it provides lethal military aid to Russia. Antony Blinken spoke to the country's top diplomat Wang Yi on the sidelines of the Global Security Conference in Munich. The US believes Beijing is considering sending weapons and ammunition to Russia for the war in Ukraine, which China denies. And the musical programme for the King's coronation has been revealed. An anthem written by composer Andrew Lloyd Webber is one of 12 new pieces to be played during the ceremony. Best known for musicals including The Phantom of the Opera and Jesus Christ Superstar, he said he's incredibly honoured to have been asked. Greek Orthodox music will also be on the playlist, a personal request by King Charles as a tribute to his late father. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Nana Akua.
Right, it's fast approaching 6 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now, first, we're going to go straight to our top story. Police searching for missing mother of two, Nicola Bulley, in Lancashire, have discovered a body in the River Wyre, near to where she went missing. 45-year-old mortgage advisor vanished in St Michael's on Wyre whilst walking her dog 3 weeks ago. Now, she just dropped her daughters, aged 6 and 9, at school. We can cross live to the scene in St Michael's on Wyre, and GB News North West reporter Sophie Reaper. Sophie, what's the latest?
Well, we heard this afternoon that a body had been found not too far away from St Michael's on Wyre, where the mother of two originally had gone missing from. The first thing we heard was that there was a major police presence here in St Michael's on Wyre, far more than there has been over recent days. Of course, there's been huge media presence, but the numbers over the last few days seem to have waned greatly. But today there was massive police presence. We then saw roads getting cordoned off, and we also heard that a call had been made around 11:30 which prompted this police search. We saw helicopters in the air and, as I say, major police presence around the roads here in St Michael's on Wyre. Then just a couple of hours ago there was a statement published, I believe first to Lancashire Police's Facebook page, in part of which it said, "We were called today at 11:36 a.m. to reports of a body in the River Wyre close to Rawcliffe Road." Now, just to say, say, Rawcliffe Road is just round the corner from me, but it is very difficult to reach it due to the heavy police presence. It also said an underwater search team and specialist officers have subsequently attended the scene, entered the water and have sadly recovered a body. No formal identification has yet been carried out, so we are unable to say whether this is Nicola Bulley at this time. So they were unable to confirm that the body that's been located was the mother of two, but they did also say that Nicola Bulley's family have been contacted with this development. They also added that at this moment they're treating the death as unexplained. Of course, this investigation for Nicola Bulley to find her has been ongoing since that morning she went missing on Friday the 27th of January. That's that crucial window of time that police were investigating between 9:10 when she was last known to be seen, and then 33 minutes past 9 when her phone was located on that bench. We know through police press conferences that their main working hypothesis has always been that Nicola had gone into the water. Of course, it's not been confirmed yet whether it is the mother of two that's been found, just to reiterate that. But of course, this now may be an answer to the question that people have been desperate for the last 3 weeks and I believe 2 days now.
I mean, Sophie, what can you tell us about the sort of scene there? I mean, are there a lot of police around there? What is the scene like at the moment?
Well, as I've been speaking to you, a couple of police officers have already walked past me here next to this stretch of river. There's police cars everywhere, police tape. As I say, we saw police helicopters earlier. The police presence has been massive. I've not seen it this great since the very start of the investigation. Of course, we can't get up to where the body was recovered from, but of course if there's underwater search teams there as well. The atmosphere here in St Michael's is very sombre. There aren't many people around other than members of the press. It's very quiet. The roads are much quieter than I've seen. The road here in front of me, Blackpool Lane, which has been kind of a central hub, if you will, for the last 3 weeks, there's nowhere near as many cars as there has been over the last few weeks, and that is of course because the news will have filtered through, and I suppose people are just trying to respect it. It is a Sunday after all, so I doubt anyone was expecting this kind of news to come today. But as I say, the atmosphere is quiet and it's sombre, and there's, other than press and police, there's not really that many people around.
Well, Sophie, thank you very much. You will keep us updated throughout the day. Thank you so much. That's Sophie Reaper there. Thank you. Well, joining me now is former Detective Chief Inspector of Scotland Yard, Mike Neville. Mike, so talk to me about this. What's your reaction to today's developments?
Well, of course, the first thing is it's the news that no one wanted to hear, but I suppose there's some degree of closure for the family. Absolutely, for the two children, dreadful. That's my first thought. The second thought, of course, the police will consider themselves vindicated because this is what they've been suggesting all along. But the tragedy is, of course, is that since the very start of this, and I've said this on GB News and elsewhere, we've had the tragic case of Anthony Knott some 3 years ago where he vanished into a river and he emerged 21 days later, and here we have 23 days. Now, each river's differently, and she's travelled just, the body, it seems, and we assuming it's Nicola, has travelled 1 mile. But the police's failure to disclose confidential information to Peter Foldling, the experts, stopped him searching for more than just a few hundred yards. And if the police had given up that information, I suggest that she may well have been found sooner, and the family may not have had to go through all this tragedy. And we have the situation where we've got all these people searching the river, and once again, it's a member of the public who comes across this tragic thing. I just think this could have been done better. All that awful medical information that me and you and no one else really needed to know didn't have to be disclosed, and she could have been found earlier if matters had, if other investigations had...
And of course, can I just say that we don't know it's definitely her. I mean, she hasn't been formally identified, right? So we can't. But yes, we hear what you're saying. Now, how difficult has it been, this investigation, for the Lancashire police?
Well, of course, it is very difficult because they're a small rural police force, really, and then the eyes of the world are on them because this, of course, people say, why are the press so interested? Well, of course, a mum goes missing and seemingly vanishes into thin air. So they've been exposed to the world's media. But the people I think who really need to be looked at here are the press officers within the force, because the information and how it's been released has been shocking in my view. It's caused nothing but hurt. And I did say if she had vanished, the best case scenario that she'd vanished to get time to herself, well, putting out information like that was making her less likely to come back. I don't know what it achieved, because I don't think you or I needed to know that in detail. And we could have been told she had mental health issues at the start, which might have changed the...
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was going to say. If they were going to put that out there, you would think that the wise time to do it would be at the beginning. Just, if they're going to put anything out like that, so that the kind of search that would have carried out may well have been a slightly wider search than the one that happened. So what is the next stage of this? What happens next?
Well, of course, we have to have there'll be a formal identification. The body's obviously, if it is Nicola, has been in the river a long, nearly 3 weeks, or best more than 3 weeks. But whether the post-mortem can ever tell us whether she entered deliberately or by accident, perhaps we'll never know. And then there'll be a formal inquest and the like. But the key thing for me in all this is the family at the moment, the closure for the family. After this, of course, there'll be internal reviews and external reviews of how the police have handled this. But as I've said, it's the press department that, to me, that really needs to be looked at, or whoever's responsible for disclosure.
Do you think that the police were given a bit of a hard time with this? Or do you feel that their actions, apart from obviously releasing that information towards the end, which was really not much use to anybody, but other than that, do you think their handling has, in a sense, been fair, and that it was really a difficult thing for them to deal with?
Of course, it was a difficult case. I think the initial response was excellent. She was identified as high risk very, very quickly. As far as being dealt with as a missing person, within an hour or so, they had drones up, they had heat-seeking helicopters and this sort of thing. But that was good. But then this second response, a sort of investigative response, wasn't as good. For example, they didn't know if she had been taken, so there was the issue of the bench not being kept for forensication, and the digital evidence. She had keys in her pocket, Mercedes car keys, I believe, or possibly a Fitbit. All those could have possibly been contacted by some digital means if it had been done quick enough before the battery's power ran out. We don't know if that's the case, but that needs to be looked in. The police often deal with digital evidence in a Stone Age way. They're hopeless. With traditional evidence, they're very good, but with digital evidence, not so good. But these are questions that need to be answered once all this has been done. And as I say, my prayers are with the family at the moment.
Yeah, but in their defence, some of those social media companies and so on don't like to give out information. They can even make it difficult for the police. But, of course, all of those things definitely need to be looked at. Now, for the family themselves, what kind of support will they get and will they be receiving right now? We don't know it's Nicola, of course, but this would be harrowing anyway.
Absolutely. And the police have improved over many decades with family liaison officers, and there's some particularly well-trained and excellent officers who can offer that advice. And they do have a difficult role because, of course, when you deal with these missing persons, we've all seen the people with crocodile tears who say, somebody's gone missing, and then we find out they're responsible. Luckily, in this case, that doesn't seem to be the case, but the family liaison officers tread a fine line between getting information about the internal workings of the family and showing a caring nature, helping to arrange things and explaining the legality and the procedures that will go on. So I'm sure those officers are doing a fantastic job, but a very difficult job as well.
And how soon do you think we are likely to find out whether the body is in fact Nicola Bulley's or not?
Well, I think the police will be very quick to get this out there because then there's been too much speculation in this case, of course. We've had all sorts of ghouls going down there and causing even more hurt for the family. So the sooner the police can get the post-mortem and the identification done, I'm sure they'll be keen to get that information out there. But one thing I would say, I don't think that some former officers I've seen have been blaming the press, and I have to defend the press here. I think the media simply reports the stories, and they report what they're given, and they've not been given the right information. Journalists and reporters I know wouldn't have disclosed certain things if they've been asked to do so. There's a lack of trust at the moment between the police and the journalist profession, and that is not good because it cuts off a vital supply of leads.
Well, listen, thank you so much for your thoughts. That's former Detective Chief Inspector of Scotland Yard, Mike Neville. Mike, thank you so much. Well, let's just recap with what the police have said. This is the statement they posted on social media this afternoon. This morning, Sunday the 19th of February, you may be aware of police activity around the river near to St Michael's. We want to provide you with an update on that activity. We were called today at 11:36 a.m. to reports of a body in the River Wye, close to Rawcliffe Road. An underwater search team and specialist officers have subsequently attended the scene, entered the water and have sadly recovered a body. No formal identification has been carried out, so we are unable to say whether this is Nicola Bulley at this time. Procedures to identify the body are ongoing. We are currently treating the death as unexplained. Nicola's family have been informed of developments, and our thoughts are with them at this most difficult time. We ask that their privacy is respected. Well, it's just coming up to 19 minutes after 4 o'clock. Here with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. On the way, the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, should Boris butt out of Brexit? Senior Tory officials have hit out at former Prime Minister Boris Johnson as he warned Rishi Sunak against ditching the Northern Ireland Protocol bill. Now, politicians have described his intervention as a nuisance. So should Sunak be given the space to end the Brexit deadlock on the island of Ireland? Some of your thoughts, email GBViews at gbnews.uk. Tell me what you think on everything we discuss. You can also tweet me at GBNews. I've got a poll up right now asking, should Boris butt out of Brexit? Cast your vote now. We'll be back after the weather.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon. It's fast approaching 22 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and it is time now for our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, should Boris butt out of Brexit? Now, the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who got Brexit done, made his first intervention since leaving office. He warned Rishi Sunak against dropping the Northern Ireland Protocol bill. Now, a source close to Boris said that this is because his basic worry is that we took the powers in the bill and we're not using them. and we haven't got a good deal as we would have because we didn't stick with it. That's what he's saying. Now, the powers within the bill allow the UK to ignore EU rules, OK, which the bloc regard as breach of international law. However, the Prime Minister is negotiating a democratic consent mechanism that would let the Northern Ireland Assembly reject new EU regulations, allowing Sunak to drop the protocol bill. Now, as it stands, the Prime Minister and EU Commission President von der Leyen says very good progress has been made, but Sunak reiterated a protocol deal is by no means done. So Brexiteers are concerned this new deal could allow the European Court of Justice to become the ultimate arbiter of disputes about EU law that emerge from Northern Ireland, whereas others see Boris's intervention as him being a nuisance. So what do you think for the Great British Debate this hour? I hope you're not confused. Should Boris butt out of Brexit? Let's see. Joining me now is former Brexit Party MEP Belinda de Lucy and former editor of The Labourist Peter Edwards. Right, so I'm going to start with you, Belinda de Lucy. Where is she? She's coming up now. All right, I'll start with you, Peter, because Belinda's hanging about. All right, so, Peter, what do you think, then, with regards to this? Should Boris butt out? Is Rishi Sunak right to ask for this thing to be ditched?
Well, Boris is an MP and is welcome to contribute, but the thing is, it's wrapped up in his own ambition, because think of other former Prime Ministers, John Major and Tony Blair, both played a huge role in the peace process in the 1990s. They don't want to be Prime Minister again, so when they speak, it's a degree of independence, but there's nothing in it for themselves, whereas for Boris Johnson, it's only been a matter of months since he resigned over several scandals and with record personal low approval ratings. So the problem is it's all wrapped up in his own future career, and I worry slightly that these interventions, however perhaps well-intentioned, put his own politics before what's going on in Northern Ireland.
So, but if you look at it, though, isn't he right, though, to sort of intervene in this? Because ultimately, or to suggest that Rishi Sunak change his course of action, otherwise the European Court of Justice will be able to intervene, and that is the worry. Let's go to Belinda de Lucy. Belinda.
Yes, hi, thank you, Nana. No, I'm very, very pleased that Boris has butted in, if you like. I mean, it's essential that we keep the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill as leverage. The Conservatives have made the mistake before of getting rid of No Deal, taking that off the table when we were in our negotiations, that left us open to having to obey the instructions of the EU. And I don't know, I'm very concerned that Rishi has delayed and put this Northern Ireland Protocol Bill on hold, because essentially all the bill is suggesting and ensuring is that foreign courts don't rule over the land of the United Kingdom. Now, there is no treaty, I think, in the world between two nations where one court of one nation gets to be the final arbiter of, debates and disputes in a treaty. It is absurd. And the ECJ is a very biased political court. This is not an independent body. It is absolutely driven by ever closer union. So it is not a court to be trusted to have any say over the United Kingdom. I wish the ERG would speak up about it. I don't trust the Rishi Hunt invertebrates that are in Westminster at the moment with negotiating with the EU at all. I don't think it's political for Boris. I think he's doing fine and dandy, earning loads of money during doing speeches. I do think he is concerned about the union. I know this was his deal, but remember at the time when he pushed this over the line, we nearly lost Brexit. This was the only deal that was going to get us over the line, and I believe Boris believed he could revisit the Northern Ireland Protocol and fix it once he was in power. But of course, Cakegate happened, he was ousted, and the Northern Ireland Protocol got put on hold by the Rishi Hunt blob. So I do think there is something afoot, and it's very concerning that Rishi is in negotiations in the EU, with the EU, where already the Vice President of the EU Commission is apparently boasting that the ECJ will have a role in Northern Ireland already. So it doesn't bode well.
Well, yeah, and look, Peter, Belinda makes a good point. I mean, that bill was there to protect us from, people who want to take over and actually overrule part of our own sovereign territory. What would you say to that?
Well, I wouldn't use words like takeover at all. It just doesn't apply. Secondly, I think there are...
OK, override our judicial process.
Yes, and it was Boris Johnson who was Prime Minister who rubber-stamped elements of this agreement, is now campaigning against, just like it was Boris Johnson who led the campaign for Brexit, elements of which he's now campaigning against. The idea that Boris Johnson is some innocent bystander coming in to save the day, when in fact he is, to his fingertips, at the root of several of these problems, is just a nonsense. I'd also go to this other point about treaties between countries and international courts. I think if you look around, there are actually a few precedents of where there is arbitration on an international basis. I'm happy to be corrected, but I think the Court of Arbitration for Sport is one of them. And you know, the ECJ is there, the European Court of Justice is there to uphold the rule of law. It's not there to give party political comment.
Belinda's shaking her head. Belinda.
That's just not true. The ECJ is a biased court. I did my dissertation in the ECJ rulings. I know full well the amount of cases that it decided upon pushing integration and further interference in domestic law. The Chen case in Ireland, please look it up. It's a horrific abuse of power. And the idea that this biased court has a say over United Kingdom territory is unacceptable. And I think it will destroy the Conservative brand completely if Rishi oversees siphoning off part of UK territory to have to submit to EU law without any representation.
What's
the
your
EU
alternative, Belinda?
couldn't give a flying flamingo about peace in Northern Ireland, and this was proved when Ursula von der Leyen in 2021 threatened to slap a hard border right in between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland over COVID vaccine imports, and she only retracted it after
What's your
worldwide
alternative?
condemnation.
Suggest something.
Well, Peter's asking you, what's the alternative, Belinda? He said, suggest something. What could they do instead?
Oh, I tell you what, why don't we follow the EU's own advisor, Lars Carlson? He wrote a 47-page report about a smart border explaining exactly how it would work. This was the EU's own advisor. He presented it to the EU during the Brexit crisis years, and the EU dismissed it out of hand completely. They have no political will or goodwill when it comes to Northern Ireland. They were given alternatives. They dismiss it because they want a hold over the UK. They want to beat us with their border issues like a stick. This is a really got a dark force element to it, and you act as if the EU is like a saint and Boris is like a demon. Unfortunately, I have to say, the EU does not have good intentions when it comes to the Northern Ireland border.
Final word to you, Peter.
So it's not my role to say who's a saint and who's a sinner, but Belinda's suggestion...
Not seducing.
solution has been rejected by 4 Conservative Prime Ministers in succession and governments of left, centre and right across Europe. So there seems to be a consensus that it's unworkable.
Well, we'll see. I mean, is it unworkable? Nobody's actually put the smart border in place. It may well work, but actually getting rid of the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill might not be the answer. But what do you think? If you've just joined in, thank you very much to Belinda DeLucy and Peter Edwards for your thoughts. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, we'll continue with our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, should Boris butt out of Brexit? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you. Good afternoon. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. Lancashire police are working to identify a body that was recovered from the River Wyre. It was located in the area where mother of 2, Nicola Bulley, disappeared more than 3 weeks ago. They're currently treating the death as unexplained and say her family has been informed of the latest development. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has described the news as heartbreaking and distressing. A cabinet minister says Boris Johnson's intervention on the Northern Ireland Protocol is not unhelpful. His warning that scrapping the bill would be a great mistake comes a day after Rishi Sunak and the European Commission president said they'd made very good progress on fixing problems with the post-Brexit trading arrangements. The protocol bill introduced under Johnson gives the UK the right to ignore EU rules, and the leader of the House of Commons, Penny Mordaunt, believes that gives the government stronger bargaining power.
I think, it's helpful to remind the EU that we have the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill. It's helpful to remind them what those expectations are. And But I would also just say that, look, there are encouraging signs. There is, people are saying there's a lot more to do, but progress is being made.
Sir Keir Starmer says under no circumstances will Labour do a deal with the SNP. Addressing a party conference in Edinburgh, he urged Scottish voters to put their faith in Labour in the wake of Nicola Sturgeon's resignation. Sir Keir says he can bring the change Scotland needs, and the tide is turning on the Tories and the SNP. Meanwhile, Scottish Health Secretary Humza Yousaf and former Minister Ash Regan have announced they're in the race to replace Nicola Sturgeon as SNP leader. Revealing their plans in the Sunday Mail, they're the first to declare their candidacy for the contest. Environment Minister Mhairi McCallan has now said she's not standing, but Finance Secretary Kate Forbes is still thought to be a possible contender. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Good afternoon. It's fast approaching 36 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Don't forget as well, you can download the GB News app. I'm Nana Akua. Now back to our top story. The police searching for the missing mother of 2, Nicola Bulley, say they've discovered a body in the River Wye, near to where she went missing. The 45-year-old mortgage advisor vanished in St Michael's on Wye whilst walking her dog 3 weeks ago. And she had just dropped off her daughters, aged 6 and 9, at school. Now, joining me to discuss this, former Superintendent Met Police, Leroy Logan. Leroy, thank you very much for joining me. So, Leroy, what can you tell me about this kind of investigation? Because there was so much going on. We had people, who are coming to the scene and doing all sorts of things. What kind of things do the police have to be very wary of when doing this sort of investigation?
Well, I don't want to come across as Captain Hindsight, but I'm only going to suggest that there's certain things you get in place. First thing, you get a goal group so that your investigation is as wide as possible. And that's people not only in the police, but in other strategic partners and other people who are impacting and community members who will have a look at what your strategy is, even if it's a missing person, and of course if there's other investigative options to look at, whether it's potential abduction, etc. So you need to get that sort of really important group to assist you to keep your investigation very evidence-based and not in any sort of hypothesis, and importantly, to get your communication strategy in line with the investigation.
Because the police got a lot of criticism during this whole process, really, from all corners. Do you, in your view, think that they mismanaged this? We even had Suella Braverman making comments. I mean, do you feel that they did that? Do you think they've been unfairly criticised?
Well, I don't think they helped themselves in terms of how they made it known that their working hypothesis was she fell in the water or she ended up in the water. I think it was important to keep every option open because you need to be keeping a wide range of views so that you're keeping control of it to say, listen, we're not discounting any option. When you just go down one road, you're going to leave a void, and it's going to be filled with all sorts of rumour and speculation and fake news, unfortunately. And that's what we found. A lot of people were going to the scenes, breaking into areas where they shouldn't have been anywhere near. And I suppose to some extent, there needed to be a lot more control around the scene itself, you know, especially when you saw so much attention, media attention to this, and it had some unique points that people related to. There needed to be cordon off that scene. At no stage, even from the very early points of that coming to media attention, did I see any sort of cordoning or anything of that nature. And I think when so many people could just literally go down there and trample around and make a nuisance of themselves, some of them, and some of them, I think, was obstructing the investigation. I think that shows a lack of control, and of course the void of these rumours and innuendos and speculation didn't help.
Were they unwise to release the information with regard to her mental state and also some personal medical information? And if they weren't unwise, when should they have done it? What's your view?
Well, I don't think they needed to, because it didn't seem to help the investigation in any way. Whether she fell in there by unforeseen circumstances or someone was involved in some way or whatever, the fact that she had certain challenges, I don't see how that added to the investigation. How did that add to show that they were in control of that? And I think a lot of people's ideas is they were trying to fend off to say, listen, we're doing the best job as possible, and it's down to the person, Nicola herself, being at fault. And that's the thing. And it's not going to reinsure young people and girls that police have a real control of things, and they really do give a police service that's fit for purpose for young people, and young women and girls, importantly, need to know that. And because of previous cases like Sarah Everard and all these other cases where young people, young women and girls are seen to be at the receiving end of police malpractice and incompetence.
Well, listen, Leroy, thank you so much for your thoughts. That's former Superintendent of the Metropolitan Police, Leroy Logan. Thank you so much. Right, well, joining me now is crime, justice and policing commentator Danny Shaw. Danny, thank you very much for joining me. Now, Danny, Home Secretary... Nice to see you. Home Secretary Suella Braverman described developments in the case of Nicola Bulley as heartbreaking and distressing after the body was found in the River Wire. She tweeted that these are heartbreaking and distressing developments, and my thoughts remain with Nicola's family at this extremely difficult time. I mean, do you think there were times when she got involved, whether she should have got involved with this case at all?
Well, I mean, let's say, first of all, that this missing persons inquiry is still ongoing until the body is confirmed to be Nicola's, and we have no indication whether the body is of a male or a female. The missing persons inquiry will still be carrying on. I think it's completely fine for the Home Secretary to say she's concerned about something and to make her own discreet inquiries, but what she shouldn't really be doing is getting involved in operational matters. There is a police and crime commissioner in Lancashire, and it's their job to hold the police service to account for their overall strategy, for the use of the budget, and to inquire if there are public concerns about a particular investigation. It's not really for the Home Secretary to do that. And so she needs to be very, very careful about not stepping over and blurring operational lines. That is not what any politicians should be doing. And if she has real concerns, then she really should have sort of set up a review or asked the Police and Crime Commissioner to do something like that. But it's understandable that politicians, because of the high-profile nature of this case, have things to say about it, particularly with the comments from Lancashire Police last week that Nicola was suffering from symptoms of the menopause and had an alcohol problem.
Why do you think this particular case sort of grabbed the nation? Because, as we know, there are hundreds of people that go missing on a daily basis. You know, not hundreds in a day, but I mean, there are hundreds of people that go missing that people are currently looking for.
Well, look, I think there are many reasons. About 180,000 people, I think, go missing in the UK every year. The majority of those are found or return home after 48 hours, after 2 weeks. It's only a small fraction of people who don't return. So obviously the attention is going to focus after a couple of days on people who are still missing. That's inevitable in one sense. The media is also going to focus, I suppose, on people for whom it's very out of character for them to go missing. That's also understandable. I think this particular case also has grabbed people's attention because, people, I suppose, could identify with Nicola being a woman with a partner, 2 young children. People could sort of see this, supposedly, apparently happy family, and a mother who's gone missing that seems to be completely out of character and unusual. And plus, when you factor in the fact that she's gone missing just, in broad daylight, walking her dog, which is what millions of people do every day in a beautiful area, all those factors together in the eyes of the media and the press, I think, add together to create a story. And a story that people can associate, can sort of identify with. And let's be honest, it's a very unusual case. It is highly unusual for someone to go missing in such a small time window. So I think that's why it is, it sort of got the reaction it did. You're absolutely right to say there are other people who are missing today. There have been other missing persons cases. I can think of one in London. The Metropolitan Police was trying to highlight of a girl, I think, who was about 13 who'd been missing, and there was a lot of concern for her welfare. That did not get the attention this did. And that's probably something to do with the character of the media and the people who live in this country being able to identify with this woman and her family.
In what way? Because what was so different about this one? I mean, because some people have pointed to race. I mean, I don't like to think of things in those terms. But do you think there was an element of that in this?
Possibly. You have someone who's got a partner. They've got 2 young children. They live, in a beautiful part of the country. She's gone missing in circumstances which are highly unusual, doing something that's very sort of, ordinary, walking a dog. It's a bit of a mystery, the way in which she disappeared. So you layer in all of those factors, and then as the days go by, that she's not found, and it creates a momentum of its own. But certainly, is race a factor? I don't know, Nana. It's very difficult to say that. There have been other cases of people who are not white who have also had a lot of attention. So it's, I don't want to say definitively, but certainly I think people can identify that with that. Many millions of us can identify with walking the dog, in the morning, having 2 kids, just drop them off at school, squeezing in that walk before going on to start your day, being on, these are so many routine things, being on a Zoom call at work and all of that sort of thing, that it was so ordinary, and yet the disappearance was so seemingly out of character that I think it's everything that sort of combined together to sort of propel it into the media consciousness.
Well, it's always a question that I always try and address, because there are people who say it's because of that, and it's good to hear that. I don't think it was either myself personally. I get drawn in by whatever the story is, and as you said, I think that's exactly what most people saw and why they were drawn into this particular case. In your view, because and briefly, what do you make of the police's handling of this particular case?
Look, I don't want to criticise the police investigation, and there's two reasons for that. One is because from everything I've seen, it's been very thorough and exhaustive. They consulted the right experts. And the second thing is, I don't know everything that they've done. There are bits and pieces of information that I don't know, and there's information they have that they haven't divulged, which may have led them to make certain decisions. I heard Leroy Logan's criticisms about sealing off the scene. He may be absolutely right, and he's got more experience of police, huge amount more experience than I have. But I'm reluctant to criticise the way they've handled the investigation. What I would criticise, and I have criticised, is their communication strategy, the handling of the media throughout this. I think the messaging hasn't been consistent. We were certainly given a very strong impression early on that there weren't any particular health factors or vulnerabilities. We now know that's not the case, and I think police were inconsistent about that. I don't think they gave the media as much information in a high-profile case as they should have done, because if you don't give the media enough official information, then people will go fishing for information, and that creates rumour, gossip, speculation, innuendo, and I'm afraid sort of feeds that sort of frenzy that we've seen. And I think the third thing is that they've been, was handled really badly, was the disclosure of information about her private life and her personal problems. That may have been justified. It may not have been justified. We don't know precisely. But the way in which that was handled was really poor, the way in which that came out. And if that was relevant information, she was classed as high risk, she was vulnerable, she had health problems. Why wasn't that disclosed at the outset of the investigation? Seems to me that was relevant information. Those things. Why wasn't that said? In fact, we were given a steer that there weren't any health problems. And so that's where I'm critical. It's about the communications and the media handling. I think it'll be, we'll see, as the weeks go by, whether the investigation could have been done differently. If it turns out, we don't know, but if it turns out that the body that they found is Nicola's body, and if it turns out, and they need to do tests on this to see whether it was in the water for 3 weeks or whether it hasn't been, and that will be the second thing to establish how long the body's been in the water for. If it turns out that it's been in the water for 3 weeks, then there will clearly be some serious questions about the searching and how thorough those searches were.
Well, listen, Danny Shaw, thank you so much for talking to me. Thank you. That's Danny Shaw. We'll keep you updated on this particular case. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. On the way, the Great British Debate. This hour, I'm asking, should Boris buy out of Brexit? My panel joining me are broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton and broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. First, we'll be back after this.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's coming up to 53 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Don't forget as well, you can download the GB News app. I'm Nana Akua. Now, it's time for our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, should Boris butt out of Brexit? The former Prime Minister who got Brexit done made his first intervention since leaving office. He warned Rishi Sunak against dropping the Northern Ireland Protocol bill. Now, the powers within the bill will allow the UK to ignore EU rules which the bloc regard as breach of international law. Now, Brexiteers believe that this new deal could allow the European Court of Justice, or the ECJ, to become the ultimate arbiter of disputes about EU law that emerge from Northern Ireland, whereas others see this intervention by Boris as him being a nuisance. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should Boris butt out of Brexit? Let's see what my panel, who are here now, finally make of that. Author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton and journalist and broadcaster Danny Kelly. I'm going to come straight to you, Christine. Nice to see you, by the way. You're totally matching my background. You've got every colour on there.
That's my old-fashioned rose shirt. No, he definitely shouldn't. I'm delighted to see Boris, I can't believe I'm saying this, Boris riding back onto the horizon, because the first duty that the British government owes is to the people of Northern Ireland, to the people who fought and died, the people who worked to get the Good Friday Agreement, and that, to me, comes before everything else. And the protocol, when the protocol was agreed, it was accepted that the Good Friday Agreement took precedence, and the protocol could not overrule the Good Friday Agreement. Now, if the Good Friday Agreement disappears, then that is a grotesque betrayal, and Boris, to me, is fighting for that. I mean, it's an absolute outrage that the EU are now not trying to play by the rules. They knew what the rules were when the protocol was put into place. They knew that the Good Friday Agreement should take precedence, and now they're playing sillies.
Now, of course, the protocol bill would mean that we can continue to overrule the ECJ. But without it, which Rishi Sunak is suggesting we don't need it, will mean that the ECJ would have jurisdiction over
Which is totally unacceptable. You cannot expect the people in Northern Ireland to live under different laws, different rules and different circumstances to the rest of the UK. It is utterly unacceptable. And we just have to stand up to the EU. It's amazing. We haven't done it yet.
I'm just thinking everyday folk in Northern Ireland, how would they notice it? If the ECJ is the ultimate arbiter, what sorts of laws and rules will the everyday man or woman in the street of Northern Ireland, how would that affect them? From my perspective, if Rishi Sunak can convince me that there is an alternative to the protocol, you're right about the sanctity of the Good Friday, the Belfast Agreement. Probably the only good thing Tony Blair ever did in 1997 was get the two groups together and power share, in my view. Now, if Rishi Sunak, because we don't know yet what that deal potentially could be, but if he can pull a rabbit out of the hat, which will satisfy one side of the power sharing, because don't forget the DUP haven't come back to their parliament.
Stormont,
thank you. They're not going to come back if the Good Friday Agreement is in any way jeopardised.
We understand that.
But their line in the sand.
We need to, I think, understand what the deal might be. Boris Johnson is correct. There's lots of Brexit purists out there that annoy me. There's very little malleability with
There's
Brexit
one
purists.
Sitting here.
Are you a Brexit purist? I think we need to start.
Much. I am a Brexit
I think we need to
purist,
give and take a little. And if there is an alternative, which means that you concede some sort of political ground, just for the sake of it, then I would suggest, as long as it doesn't bring back trouble.
Can I just say that's a lot of take, and
it's a lot of,
and the ECJ. So what you're saying is that it would be okay for another court in Europe to overrule a decision made by our court. And that protocol bill makes sure that we still have the power to overrule the ECJ. And I think that's really important.
But, you know, as a bloke living in England, that doesn't bother me. I've got to be selfish about it. I'm not a Brexit purist. I'm not. I don't want violence to return to Northern Ireland, but I'm not a Brexit purist. I don't believe that the ECJ are a group of monsters. I do believe that they probably want to make it as difficult as possible and as unattractive as possible, because there's lots of landlocked EU member states that will have exactly the same predicament. Sorry, Christine.
It's all right. No, you were talking. Are you a unionist? Do you believe in the union?
Very much so.
Well, then, if you believe in the union, how can you possibly accept that people living in Northern Ireland will be living under different legal conditions?
Well, I go back to my earlier question. What are these conditions that they should be worried about?
Well, I mean, what's going on at the moment, this ridiculous business where they've got all these different customs lanes and the good Marks and Spencer's.
How does that affect the average man or woman?
Well, it'll affect you because you won't get certain foods.
Yeah.
Certain foods.
Well, now you've put food into the equation.
Now you're interested.
Those EU, they can sod off.
Now you're interested.
In case that's a bad word.
No, but I'm just saying that generally the man or the woman on the street, they don't want to return to the Troubles, and if there is some sort of...
It's a principle that we should all be governed by the same rules. We are the United Kingdom.
But you are a Brexit purist. I would say the majority of people who voted for Brexit weren't that bothered about their sovereignty, they were bothered about unfettered immigration. That's just my personal view.
Well, we discussed this last week, and I said sovereignty actually was very important in my view.
Of course it was.
Yeah, but
I think to a lot of people.
Very much so.
But that wasn't my view. I just wanted, I wanted to sort out the money situation because I felt that the unvetted immigration was creating a situation that was bringing down the wages of the British people, and that it was unlivable. You cannot live in this country with such low wages, which is why the pound was high. People were going and taking that money somewhere else. But can I just say apologies for that word? I don't think you're allowed to use that.
You're not allowed to use that word.
I didn't hear what he said. And also we were pouring billions and billions into the...
I get that. The financial argument is...
Anyway,
you're right.
But
you know when people say we want to trade around the world, I don't think a lot of people were that bothered about doing a trade deal with America. Personally, I think it was unfettered immigration, the waste of money, quote unquote.
No, but it wasn't.
Combination
but you're talking about trade deals, and that would be companies that trade internationally, and not everybody does that. But it's not about that. People, I think it was more to do with the fact that wages were stagnating.
We agree. I'm saying the same
thing. And also the fact that a lot of these big businesses were just drunk on cheap labour, and they had to get off.
We're saying the same thing.
The booze.
We're paraphrasing each other.
Well, there was a raft of different reasons, and everybody picked and chose. It was like pick and mix, wasn't they? Yeah. They took their own. Mine was sovereignty, and I want to be able to do trade deals with the rest of the world without being told by the EU you're not allowed to have a trade deal with the United States. I mean,
or
I was about to say something
or Africa as well. I thought that in a way it was slightly divisive and it ultimately slightly racist in my view, because countries like Africa, Ghana, places in Africa, Ghana and other countries were not really able to trade in the way without having the set deal with the EU. I just didn't like it, and it meant that we were really hamstrung, and it seemed that it was a lot of the white countries that were able to trade, and it was very difficult for the African countries to trade. So that's what I think.
But that can't be racist. That could probably be because Ghana hasn't got a great deal to offer, maybe.
What's Ghana?
I'm
laughing. It's got
what's
gold.
Ghana?
I want to laugh
got gold, yes.
Gold, coffee, cocoa, pretty much everything.
So we're already dealing with Ghana then?
No, but I'm saying that we can't do our own individual set deals with these countries. We have to sort of go along with the EU. No, I'm just saying the elements of it I thought were...
You've got a bit woke in the last week.
I have not gone woke. I'm absolutely... I know what
If she's gone woke, then heaven help the rest of us.
I don't think so. I just say it as I see it, and that's what I see. But anyway, if you just joined us, welcome on board. I've gone woke. This is GB News. More to come in the next hour.
Yes, we get rid of him now. Yeah.
It's GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next hour we'll be covering the latest developments in the Nicola Bulley search after the police discovered a body in the River Wye near where she went missing. Now, the Home Secretary has called the development heartbreaking, and we'll be talking about that after your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you. Good afternoon. Well, as you've just been hearing, Lancashire Police are working to identify a body that was recovered from the River Wye. It was located in the area where the mother of two, Nicola Bulley, disappeared more than 3 weeks ago. They're currently treating the death as unexplained and say her family has been informed of the latest development. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has described the news as heartbreaking and distressing. Former Detective Chief Inspector Mike Neville says the post-mortem examination might not give us information about what happened.
There'll be a formal identification. The body's obviously, if it is Nicola, has been in the river a long, nearly 3 weeks, or best more than 3 weeks. So whether the post-mortem can ever tell us whether she entered deliberately or by accident, perhaps we'll never know. There's been too much speculation in this case, of course. We've had all sorts of ghouls going down there and causing even more hurt for the family. So the sooner the police can get the post-mortem and the identification done, I'm sure they'll be keen to get that information out there.
A Cabinet Minister says Boris Johnson's intervention on the Northern Ireland Protocol is not unhelpful because there's still plenty of work to be done. Mr Johnson's warning that scrapping the bill would be a great mistake comes the day after Rishi Sunak and the European Commission President said they made very good progress on fixing problems with the post-Brexit trading arrangements. The protocol bill introduced under Johnson gives the UK the right to ignore EU rules, and Leader of the House of Commons, Penny Mordaunt, believes that gives the government a stronger bargaining position.
I think, it's helpful to remind the EU that we have the Northern Ireland Protocol bill. It's helpful to remind them what those expectations are. But I would also just say that, look, there are encouraging signs. There is... People are saying there's a lot more to do, but progress is being made.
Political commentator Dr John Coulter says Mr Johnson's intervention on Brexit, his first since leaving office, could have serious ramifications.
Solving the protocol deal in Northern Ireland will guarantee the security of the peace process for, I would say, the next generation. Now, what Boris has done is really thrown a Trojan horse into the political negotiations here. Originally, the protocol was always seen as the European Union punishing the UK for daring to democratically vote to leave the European Union. So we've got to get a solution to the protocol.
Sir Keir Starmer says under no circumstances will Labour do a deal with the SNP. Addressing a party conference in Edinburgh, he urged Scottish voters to put their faith in Labour in the wake of Nicola Sturgeon's resignation. Sir Keir says he can bring the change Scotland needs, and the tide is turning on the Tories and the SNP.
Over 15 years in power, and what do they have to show for it? Honestly, it's always somebody else's fault. And the reason is simple. They're not truly invested in Scotland's success. Anything Scotland achieves within the UK is met with gritted teeth, seen as a roadblock to the one true goal. Whatever happens in the coming months, my message is the same. No deal under any circumstances.
Meanwhile, Scottish Health Secretary Humza Yousaf and former Minister Ash Regan have announced they're in the race to replace Nicola Sturgeon as SNP leader. Revealing their plans in the Sunday Mail, they're the first to declare their candidacy for the contest. Environment Minister Mhairi McCallan has now said she's not standing, but it's still thought Finance Secretary Kate Forbes could be a contender. Nominations close next Friday and the winner will be announced at the end of March. The US Secretary of State has warned China will face serious consequences if it provides lethal military aid to Russia. Antony Blinken spoke to the country's top diplomat, Wang Yi, on the sidelines of the Global Security Conference in Munich. The US believes Beijing is considering sending weapons and ammunition to Russia for the war in Ukraine, which Russia has denied. And the musical programme for the King's coronation has been revealed. An anthem written by composer Andrew Lloyd Webber is one of 12 new pieces to be played during the ceremony. Best known for musicals including The Phantom of the Opera and Jesus Christ Superstar, he said he's incredibly honoured to have been asked. Greek Orthodox music will also be on the playlist, a personal request by King Charles as a tribute to his late father. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Nana Akua.
Good afternoon. It is fast approaching 7 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. First, our top story. Police searching for missing mother of two, Nicola Bulley, in Lancashire, revealed this afternoon that they discovered a body in the River Wye, near to where she went missing. The 45-year-old mortgage advisor vanished in St Michael's on Wye whilst walking her dog 3 weeks ago. She'd just dropped her daughters, aged 6 and 9, at school. We can cross live to the scene in St Michael's on Wye, and GB News' North West reporter, Sophie Reaper. Sophie, what's the latest?
Well, we heard this afternoon that a body has now been recovered in the search for missing mother of two, Nicola Bulley. The first we saw was a major police presence here in St Michael's on Wye and the surrounding area, and that remains in place. There's uniform officers making patrols. There's still a police cordon in place. We saw helicopters and the police dive teams were also brought in. Then at around, we then heard that around 11:30, there was an anonymous tip-off that prompted this police search. Then in a statement just a couple of hours ago, Lancashire Police said, we were called today at 11:36 to reports of a body in the River Wye close to Rawcliffe Road. Now, just to give our viewers a little bit of information about where that is, I'm stood here in St Michael's on Wye, just downstream, a little bit downstream from where Nicola originally is believed to have gone missing from. Where the body has been located is around a mile downstream. Police also said an underwater search team and specialist officers have subsequently attended the scene, entered the water and have sadly recovered a body. No formal identification has yet been carried out, so we were unable to say whether this is Nicola Bulley at this time. So, of course, the family have been contacted with this latest development, but it is worth reiterating that it has not been confirmed as missing 45-year-old Nicola Bulley. And police also have added that the death is at the moment being treated as unexplained. This investigation has, of course, been ongoing since Friday the 27th of January, when Nicola Bulley was originally reported as missing. We're now waiting to hear any updates one way or another from Lancashire Police, but this now could be the answer to the question, what has happened to Nicola Bulley? And we'll be bringing you, of course, all the latest updates on this as we get them.
Right, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your thoughts there. Sophie Reaper reporting there. All right, the police searching for missing mother of two, Nicola Bulley, say that they have discovered a body in the River Wye near to where she went missing. So joining me to discuss this is editor of Lancashire Post, Nicola Adam. Nicola, OK, so talk to me about, you know, what the developments have been and how the atmosphere has been where you are.
Obviously, it's been a very tense, very sad 3 weeks while the search has been ongoing for Nicola Bulley, and the village of St Michael's has been absolutely overrun with people, press, you know, and I include ourselves in that, and also, you know, TikTokers and things like that, but also police, you know, and this is a small village. It's there's under 700 people in St Michael's. It's not somewhere that troubles our news agenda very frequently here in Lancashire. It's very quiet, known for like the nice walks in the area along the river. So this last 3 weeks has been incredibly difficult, and it's been today's news that a body has been found is obviously, you know, obviously they haven't identified the body at the moment. They can't confirm anything, but where this body has been found is probably around a mile from the bench where Nicola's phone was found, and also her dog running loose. So, you know, obviously the links have been drawn there, and police were called around lunchtime today to the riverside. Some walkers or local, you know, people passing by spotted something, and they called in the police helicopter, which was scanning the area, and the police helicopter landed, and police, by about 1 o'clock this afternoon, police were all at the scene there. So it is looking very serious, but obviously the priority for the police, you know, for the village of St Michael's is Nicola's family, because this could not be more of a difficult time right now. So I think they're all thinking of the family and friends friends. If this is Nicola, it's a really, really sad conclusion to what's been an incredibly difficult time for them. If it's not, then some of the poor soul has lost their life. So whichever way around that happens, it's a very sad day in St Michael's.
Local people being sort of looking at the police and seeing the investigation that they're doing as a good investigation, because the sort of attitude and the energy that we get from the outside is the police have messed up and done this and done that. But what do the locals actually feel about the job the police have done?
All the way through, and I've said this a few times. Actually, we've not heard anything negative in terms. Obviously, Nicola has not been found. That was a fact. But in terms of local residents, they've actually been really quite supportive of the police investigation. They say that a lot of care has been taken with them. People who are more vulnerable or are involved or were witnesses. They've been getting regular calls from police to check they're okay, literally on every day. So. Generally, I think the actual police inquiry investigation itself, has been pretty thorough, and they have been all over it in many ways. So obviously, more the criticisms more around the comms around it. So maybe some difficult decisions have had to be made, because it's been an unprecedented. It's a bit of an overused word, but it is for an unprecedented amount of attention on this. What was at first just a missing persons inquiry, not just a missing person, but normally there's other people missing in the county. This is not the only missing person, and the amount of attention that has gone on in the county, nationally, and even internationally, has been just incredible, really.
Do you share the criticism given to the police with regard to the release of personal information about Nicola Bulley, or in your view, do you feel that perhaps that is information that should have been shared, and perhaps the police should have maybe shared it also with the crew who were actually going to look for the body at the time?
I think that it was a very uncomfortable release of information. I'm not personally, and this is just me speaking, I don't necessarily think it was necessary. However, I do think that their hand was forced, and they had to make a very difficult decision on the fly at that point. I think, I don't think that it was something that they did lightly, put it that way. Obviously, there's now going to be an inquiry into exactly how this all came about, but, I don't feel like it was... there was no. The reason behind it was more that they were trying to control the narrative rather than this sort of information getting out more widely and inaccurately, in a more misinformed way. So they were trying to do the right thing, but I think it was ill-advised to release that information.
And what do you think that perhaps they could learn from this kind of thing? I mean, you had a lot of people coming to the village, and a lot of people just doing all sorts of things on TikTok and everything else like that. What do you think that perhaps the police could have perhaps done better, maybe to protect the village from such an onslaught of so many people coming to it?
I mean, I don't think from the very start that anyone would have ever thought that it would ever be like, this kind of attention on this kind of case. So I don't think they necessarily did anything wrong. Perhaps they could have cordoned off that area, but I mean, it's quite a rural area. It's difficult. You can't really sort of cordon off that kind of place. It's not like it's a road or so I'm not quite sure what they could have done in that point. I mean, in terms of people coming into the area, there has been police patrolling all the time, keeping an eye on. I don't think I've ever heard of a case like this where there's been quite so much amateur sleuthing, TikTok sleuthing, podcasting and all that thing. Because when this sort of thing happens, often there's media attention, and media are managed in a certain way, and sort of media are trained to manage this situation. Most of the media are trained in the law, of libel and things like that. But when you've got social media on top of that, when you have everybody in the world is a journalist and a publisher, or can be, or can comment, very difficult to control that. And I don't think that it was within Lancashire Police's abilities to control the noise that that came from outside of this case. It's just incredible. It's a situation. I think this is a case study for moving forward for all police forces to know. They need to look at how they manage a situation like this in the future.
Is it quite a close-knit community then? Is there quite a good community spirit?
The community have been fantastic, and I think they've gone through a lot together. Right from the very get-go, they were incredibly organised. They worked together really hard to look for Nicola. They did everything they possibly could to search for her. They had maps printed out. They had they kind of from the sort of community centre area, or from the tennis centre, they had people, issuing them with information. They even had a QR code so you could go and look for the information, put the description out there. As you can see in some of this video, that they're out standing by the side of the road trying to get dash cam from the day of Nicola's disappearance, just in case somebody who's driven through the village, because it's quite a main road that drives through the village, you see. So people might be just commuting through there once a week, once a day, and might not realise that they could contribute to the inquiry. So they were incredibly organised, and they were all supporting each other through that. But, obviously it's been difficult for them to manage all these people coming from outside, and they understandably become, a bit, annoyed at all of the people in the village who shouldn't be there, so, which is understandable. It's a lot.
Well, listen, thank you so much for your thoughts, Nicola. That's Nicola Adams. She's the editor of the Lancashire Post. Thank you so much for talking to me. Well, coming up after the break, we'll be staying on this top story. Lancashire police say that they're working to identify a body discovered in the River Wye, near to where missing mother Nicola Bulley disappeared. We'll be getting you the latest and some expert views on the case.
Hello there, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office. I'm Jonathan Fortree. We do have a few sunny intervals around this afternoon, but the general theme for the next few days is a cloudy one. Frontal systems pushing their way across the northern half of the UK will bring a more unsettled picture here. Although we have high pressure in the south, the feed of southwesterly winds coming in off the Atlantic is going to slowly build the clouds here. So a few clear intervals for central southeastern areas of England throughout this evening, but the cloud tending to build as we move throughout the night, and some bits of drizzle are possible for Northern Ireland, parts of Western England and Wales. More extensive rain moving into Scotland. This will be accompanied by some particularly strong winds, up to 60-70 mile an hour gusts are possible, so do just take care here. Underneath the cloud though, it's going to be a mild night for all of us. Some places holding up around 10-11 degrees Celsius. The rain across Scotland will tend to stall into Monday, so could turn into a fairly damp and drizzly day here. For the north of that will be some sunny intervals for the Northern Isles, but it's going to remain particularly gusty across Shetland. For Northern Ireland, England and Wales, it will be a cloudy day. The odd break is possible, perhaps for parts of Herefordshire, Northumberland, so temperatures could reach 15-16 degrees Celsius, but we'll retain that cloud as we move into the evening period. Again, some drizzle is possible. The rain in the north gradually shifting its way off more into parts of the Highlands and eventually clearing its way off to the Northern Isles as well. But the vast majority of us will again remain frost-free as we move into the start of Tuesday. Looking to be another fairly cloudy day for all of us. Again, the odd glimmer of sunshine might come through, but for most of us we will see fairly grey skies. Into Wednesday, we'll start to see this frontal system shift its way southeastwards across the country, and that will bring in a slight change to our weather. We start feeding in some northerly winds, and so it will turn brighter for a time, but we'll also see temperatures just falling off that bit more. Enjoy your day.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farrow.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes back on the TV
Surprised
with me this
you
morning.
even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. If you just joined me, welcome on board. It's just coming up to 23 minutes after 5 o'clock. Now, Home Secretary Suella Braverman has described developments in the case of Nicola Bulley as heartbreaking and distressing after a body was found in the River Wyre. Lancashire Police carried out a new search early today near to where the mother of two disappeared, and they say that the body has yet to be identified and the death is being treated as unexplained. So joining me to discuss the case is retired Scotland Yard Detective Inspector Hamish Brown, MBE. Hamish, thank you so much for joining me. Now, Hamish, talk to me about this particular process that the police went through to find this body. We don't know whether it's Nicola Bulley, but did they do everything in the sort of right process and order? Because I know you're an expert in that sort of thing. So would you say the procedures they followed and the way they executed them were the way that you would have gone about it?
Well, firstly, good afternoon to you, Nana, and I agree with the Home Secretary. This is just the news the relatives didn't want to hear, but perhaps privately they were thinking that was going to happen as time went on. So there are a couple of aspects here. Clearly, the river has been searched again. The police have kept going, and good for them. I know comments been made about the investigation. I don't subscribe to the adverse side at all. They put a lot of work into this, and they've gone over and re-gone over searches they've done. And sadly, this person's been found. And the next thing to do is identify the deceased. Now, I'm going to just be very careful with my language here, not to upset anyone. But the deceased will have to be identified. Now, very often that's visually. Now, it depends I suppose, the condition of the body, whether that's feasible or indeed a good idea. So they're going to look for other things like clothing, personal belongings, jewellery, that sort of thing, which perhaps the family can help with. It's going to be a difficult process for them. Outside that, there's going to be DNA, perhaps, and I don't know, when the police went to a house, as a precaution, they might have taken hairbrushes, combs, toothbrush, and that can identify DNA evidence. Ultimately, it would be a matter of doing some analysis and taking comparisons with blood family relatives, and they can go from there. So that's the first thing they've got to do. Secondly, there will be an examination of this person. And again, I'll choose my words carefully, but I'm sure it'll be no surprise to everyone. There will be what's known as a post-mortem examination. And given the circumstances, the coroner may well elect it should be done by a Home Office pathologist. But in any event, it will take place, and hopefully there will be a cause of death. If it is Nicola, she would have been in the water for 3 weeks, and that can destroy certain things. But it will give the police a good idea of what this person died from. And it is from there they'll have to look at overall their investigation and how this fits in, what they have. Maybe it supports it, maybe it doesn't. And I hope they'll keep an open mind where they go from here. But the identification process, and I've done this both inside and outside the police with agency work, working within the criminal justice system, it isn't pleasant for anyone. And I'm afraid it's just another line of unpleasant torture for the family, but something nevertheless that must be done.
And how long does it usually take them for the police to release this kind of information?
Well, the police will be more than aware that the media are on their back, and they would have set up a team, I'm sure, to put this out, and given recent events, I'm sure they'll be very careful how this is worded. But first of all, they must tell the family in the first instance, so the family know what's going on, and nothing is a surprise in the newspapers. And once again, I've got to say, and covered this quite a lot in the last few weeks in the media, the people with these wild ideas just keep away. And that includes retired police officers, by the way. I try to keep a very neutral view on this and let the police just get on with it. It doesn't help anyone, and it just feeds speculation, and it adds to the distress of the family. So there will be a period of time. It could be done pretty quickly. Maybe there's something significant with the deceased that easily identifies them. Perhaps it isn't. But when the body is sent to the hospital, to the mortuary, it may well be put, and the coroner will be informed, believed to be. So they have a name and they'll work from there. So we'll have to see what happens from there. And indeed, of course, it follows the police investigation, their painstaking work they've done up to now. And hopefully they can draw a line on this pretty quickly. But we'll have to see what is what. And my heart, I know everyone else's heart and prayers go out to the family. And it's very difficult to know what to say. But at least she has been... someone has been found, which might be identified as Nicola.
Mm. And obviously the hope for the family, and, you know, if it is Nicola, we don't want it to be Nicola. We'd rather that it was nobody and this hadn't happened at all. But if it is, there will be a level of closure. But it is heartbreaking that this has happened and this incident is there. Is there anything, because you talked about the people doing sleuths going in there and pretending to be detectives and stuff, is there anything that the police could have done to kind of prevent or protect the scene better? I know it was a wide space, but in your experience, is there anything they could have done?
Well, they had to make these decisions pretty quickly, and it is conceivable they could have... I suppose, roped off the area, you know, put pass tapes up and that sort of thing. I'm not sure how far that would have taken that as a public bench in a park or by a river. I think they will look at, in hindsight, on their media strategy and how certain information was released. I think there's no need to go over it because you know what I'm talking about. There's certain issues which has caused something of a storm in the media with the public, and people have voiced some concern. But the situation is they were in a very difficult position how to take this forward, with the possibility that what they knew of Nicola's background was going to make perhaps the tabloids, been sold to tabloids, and it would not have been presented perhaps in a very sympathetic way. So the hand was a little bit forced. But what they might look at is how this came about in the first place, and could there have been a strategy to, I don't know, give some information or hold things back. And they were between a rock and a hard place eventually, and they might feel they were in a no-win situation. But they may well look back at the media strategy. But I am quite convinced, excuse me, from what I've heard, what I've seen, and that excellent police conference on Wednesday this week, the police have put their heart and soul and effort into this very unpleasant investigation.
Hamish Brown, MB, thank you very much for talking to me. He's a retired Scotland Yard detective. Thank you for your thoughts. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, we'll be talking about the impact of the Nicola Bulley case after senior politicians intervened this week. Why has the case captured attention at the highest levels? All of that after your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. Lancashire police are working to identify a body that was recovered from the River Wyre. It was located in the area where mother of two, Nicola Bulley, disappeared more than 3 weeks ago. They're currently treating the death as unexplained and say her family has been informed of the latest development. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has described the news as heartbreaking and distressing. A Cabinet Minister says Boris Johnson's intervention on the Northern Ireland Protocol is not unhelpful. His warning that scrapping the bill would be a great mistake comes a day after Rishi Sunak and the European Commission President said they'd made very good progress on fixing problems with the post-Brexit trading arrangements. The Protocol bill introduced under Johnson gives the UK the right to ignore EU rules, and Leader of the House of Commons Penny Mordaunt believes that gives the government stronger bargaining power.
I think, it's helpful to remind the EU that we have the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill. It's helpful to remind them what those expectations are. But I would also just say that, look, there are encouraging signs. There is, people are saying there's a lot more to do, but progress is being made.
Sir Keir Starmer says under no circumstances will Labour do a deal with the SNP. Addressing a party conference in Edinburgh, he urged Scottish voters to put their faith in Labour in the wake of Nicola Sturgeon's resignation. Sir Keir says he can bring the change Scotland needs, and the tide is turning on the Tories and the SNP. Meanwhile, Scottish Health Secretary Humza Yousaf and former Minister Ash Regan have announced they're in the race to replace Nicola Sturgeon as SNP leader. Revealing their plans in the Sunday Mail, they're the first to declare their candidacy for the contest. Environment Minister Mhairi McCallan has now said she's not standing, but Finance Secretary Kate Forbes is still thought to be a possible contender. TV, online and DAB Plus radio. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. It's fast approaching 38 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Right, let's also discuss the developments in the search for Nicola Bulley with Stephen Roberts, a former detective at the Metropolitan Police. Now, if you just tuned in, hello there, Stephen. I want to talk to you about this. Now, the case of Nicola Bulley has drawn attention from politicians at the highest level, with the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary this week expressing their concern about the personal information shared about her mental health and the impact of the menopause on her. What is your view on whether that information should or should not have been revealed or released?
I'm afraid my view is that we simply don't know the answer to that question. The reasons why the senior investigating officer chose to release the information may have something to do with other information that we're unaware of, that had a key impact on the investigation as a whole. So there may or may not have been good reasons why that information, that very personal, very sensitive information, was released. My instinct is that it was a misstep. But sitting on the outside, as all those retired police officers and indeed politicians have to be, we simply don't know the answer. And it's unfair and a distraction on the investigation to come to any sort of conclusion, any sort of view, without actually having all the facts that the investigators themselves had.
That is fair to say. Do you think that the intervention of people like Suella Braverman on these sort of cases is actually a bit of distraction as well, and perhaps that they should step back?
Certainly the public intervention is a distraction. The convention is that politicians do not comment or give instructions on operational police matters. And there are very good reasons for that. It's well established. On this occasion, having both the Prime Minister, Home Secretary and a number of other senior politicians commenting is yet another pressure on the senior investigating officer that, frankly, she can do without. She has more important and more urgent things on her plate than addressing the concerns of the Home Secretary. It is common in high-profile cases that there will be discreet inquiries behind the scenes, not in public, about the progress of an investigation. It's quite common for Home Office officials to ring the senior investigating officer or the chief constable, indeed, and say, well, are there any other resources that would help you to push this investigation forward faster? That in private is, or can be, very helpful. But public comment is simply a distraction.
And with regard to the team that was sent, who offered, the private company that offered to search the river for free and to see if they could find the body, because they said that their equipment was excellent, which I know it was. I don't think they got to search the bit that her body was found in, but that could be partly because they weren't given that crucial bit of information that later was shared with the general public about her health and issues, which maybe should have been shared. Do you think that that information should perhaps have been shared with that team who are doing that particular job for the investigation?
If the brief for that team was to search a particular bit of the river, then that's what they were required to do. I come back again to the knowledge and the understanding of the senior investigating officer and the control that that officer needs to have over the overall investigation. It's so easy, and we've seen it on this occasion, for all sorts of people to think that they can be helpful, and most of them are well-meaning, but to think that they can be helpful when in fact they will get in the way and distract from the driving force of an investigation. So the SIO simply has to manage all these things and has to make a judgment about whether or not all the information should be disclosed to a particular individual or a particular team.
But their criticism was, and I did read the criticism, was that had they known that there were other issues that which is potentially why the police were so convinced of their assumption that she'd fallen into the river, that they would have changed the way in which they searched for the body, or for a body, or the way they conducted their search.
Indeed, but we should bear in mind that this is an independent commercial organisation that has commercial imperatives as well as very beneficial public-spirited ones.
Yeah, I suppose if you look, there is that angle to it as well. I can hear your thoughts. So overall, then, do you feel the police have handled this the best they could in a good way? Because we're getting reports the police even referred themselves, didn't they, to the Complaints Commission?
The Lancashire Constabulary referred themselves not to do with this investigation as such. What they referred themselves for was for an encounter between police officers and health officials with Nicola Bulley early on in January. And the question asked there is, well, did everybody do everything that they could have done in order to avert this tragedy? The referral is not about the investigation itself.
Well, of course, we'll keep abreast of what's going on with this particular case, and as soon as we get any news, we'll let everybody know what has been happening. How long does it usually take for them to give us an idea as to who this person is, who they found in the river?
There will be a whole series of identification procedures that have to be gone through, and depending on what is available and what is possible, it could take a matter of hours or it could take several days. We shouldn't jump to the conclusion that's in all our minds, let's be frank, until we know for certain the identity of the body that's been found in the river.
Well, listen, it's been very good talking to you. Thank you so much for your thoughts, and we'll come back to you at some other time. Thank you very much, Stephen. Good to talk to you, Stephen Roberts. All right, well, that was Stephen Roberts. The Home Secretary has also, again, responded to the case of Nicola Bulley. We talked about that today. Suella Braverman tweeted, "These are heartbreaking and distressing developments. My thoughts remain with Nicola's family at this extremely difficult time." Well, to discuss this and the Prime Minister's criticism earlier this week, I'm joined by former Labour MP Stephen Pound. Stephen, thank you very much for joining me in the studio. Why do you think this case has captured the attention of the government?
I think because of the sheer ordinariness of the woman. This is a young woman, more middle-aged woman, drops the kids off at school, goes for a walk with a dog. It's something that resonates with absolutely everybody. But look, it's also, there becomes an accelerating process where it becomes, the profile increases, the profile increases, the profile. And I think whether the body is of Nicola Bulley or not, it's somebody's body, and some family somewhere is going to feel a pain. They're going to feel the pain of loss. So I think if it's her, then maybe it'll make closure. If it isn't, then another family could be hurt. But look, we had a situation, it's very close to home for me. In my constituency a few years ago, we had a sweet and lovely 14-year-old girl went missing by the Brent, which flows into the Thames and ultimately into the sea. Nobody knew where she was. She'd been jogging along the riverbank, and huge numbers of us offered to search Elthorne Park, Southall Park, all the areas along by the river there. But we did it with the police. The police said you can walk behind police officers on a police line. Eventually, the poor girl's body was found under logs, hidden in the river. But I then felt that the police should have been given some information, because the person who, in fact, killed himself, who had actually murdered this poor girl, was from a European Union country, and I made some criticisms of the fact that the data wasn't shared. That caused great pain to the family. And the family said in no uncertain terms, I, as the local MP, shouldn't have got involved. I shouldn't have made any statements. I shouldn't have actually talked about changing the law. And it just made things worse. It twisted the knife for them. And I think my natural reaction as the MP, as somebody who, you know, I lived at the end of the young girl who died, God rest her soul, was at the end of my street. I wanted to do something, wanted to get involved. And so that's a human reaction. But equally, a sensible adult reaction would have been to stand back and let the experts do the job. And I think the problem here, we have this great group of sort of rubberneckers pouring up there saying they want to help. They weren't helping. And, you know, I think both of the police officers you've spoken to, you know, Hamish and Mr. Roberts, were being very, very circumspect in their words. I should imagine a lot of police officers are saying a lot more than that under their breath. It didn't help. But, you know, when the dust has settled, there's a lot to look at in this particular case. The obvious thing is, you know, did she fall? Did she jump? Was she pushed? Was she, I mean, God forgive me for even saying this, but was she alive when she went into the water? All these questions need to be resolved. But right now, identification is the important thing. Closure or a completely new case need to be resolved. But above all, I think that people realise that this kind of vicarious business of looking into other people's private lives is not healthy. It's not good. And I still think, I don't know the full facts. It's not going to stop me from commenting because most MPs and even ex-MPs do. But I wish the police hadn't given that information.
Why?
She's got two young daughters. The two daughters didn't need to know that. And I also think if a woman was suffering from these issues, you know, would she have been capable of driving the kids to school, coming home, getting the dog, doing on a conference call? It's not the behaviour of somebody, in my experience, who has those issues.
Yeah, some people would say, coming back to your first point with regard to politicians getting involved, some people would say that actually it tends to raise the profile of the case and tends to assist with the resources being allocated to it, so it brings it to the public eye. And the fact that someone like Suella Braverman is overlooking and seeing what is going on specifically with that case will ensure that the police act more correctly. Not that they haven't, and that's not to say they haven't, but is that not actually, for her to get involved, actually a good thing on this case?
Well, I think the Home Secretary has to. The Home Secretary ultimately is the head of, you know, of all the combined constabularies. There's no way. I think what isn't helpful is sort of local politicians who are not at that level making comments, because you've got to ask yourself, is this about me or is it about them? Is it about the family? And a lot of people, there's this kind of wishing to be associated, this sort of, you know, sort of Facebook, TikTok business about, you know, I want to be there, I want to be involved. And it gets very mawkish sometimes. People who never knew the poor girl, who are, you know, suddenly saying, oh, you know, she's broken our hearts. Well, no, it's the family that are going to have their hearts broken. And I think sometimes, this may be a bit counterintuitive, but a period of silence from members of Parliament and politicians can be a very, very good thing. And I think this is an example.
You also talked about the information that was released and that you felt that that would perhaps affect the children and so on. I mean, I don't know much about these things, and I think it's very, very sad for the family. I don't know whether this is Nicola, it may not be. But, you know, to me, I would have thought that sort of information, if you're going to release it at all, should be at the beginning, which would have assisted. I know that the comment was that perhaps that the family or the company or private company was searching, so maybe they're saving face by saying, well, you know, if you told us this, we would have found her. But I think there is a level of... The police were really in a dilemma there, because to give that information to a private organisation that is not sort of circled by any sort of code of specific conduct like they are in terms of silence in information is difficult. Do you think that they made the right call, though? Because I think, actually, in the end, they should have perhaps told these people who were searching.
Well, let's think of another example. Do you remember the kids in Indonesia who were trapped underwater in the lagoon? You know, what's happening today in Turkey and in northern Iraq, northern Syria? People are going there and volunteering to help. You know, people who've got expertise in cave rescue, in actually identifying bodies. People are there going to help, but they're doing it within the context of the wider rescue operation. And they're also specialists and experts. We've got, you know, medics from Médecins Sans Frontières. I think it's a different thing. I'd like to give people credit for nobility and honesty of wanting to help and wanting to come along. But in this case, I don't think it did help. And I think the fact that the police were then almost pressured into giving this information, I think they were, because there was such a huge spotlight of public interest on it. And I think that the police would asking themselves the basic question, you know, was this an accident? Or was it not an accident? Now, you and I would probably think, and you're...
So which bit do you think didn't help? Bringing in the specialist crew, giving them the information?
No, I think giving the information was not helpful.
To the specialist crew who
to anybody at that time. I think
why? Because where they searched, what they said was the reason why he searched, or they searched in a certain way, was because if you walk into a river, that's totally different to if you actually jump in or you're pushed or something. And you might, if your intention is to take your own life, you may go to a different bit rather than somewhere where where she left her phone. If it is
the river was running downstream, so it's most unlikely that she could have been washed upstream. There's a weir there, and don't forget, it was 40 years ago. There was a similar case. A young man fell into the river there, and his body was then found on Morecambe Sands, just further upstream. So it would have made absolutely no difference at all, except from identifying the cause. They should have looked at the bank to see whether there were slip marks, and they should have get that sort of information.
But I think they did.
You rightly said that because they didn't isolate and sanitise the scene, they didn't know that. Now it's most unusual. I mean, for someone just to stand on a riverbank and jump into the water and drop their phone and leave their dog. It's just odd. But which makes me think maybe...
Poor dog. The dog would have seen if...
the dog would have been running around in circles, barking and probably jumping into the water to try...
Apparently, the dog was totally dry, which is why...
Which is odd, isn't it?
That perhaps he didn't go in the water, which he didn't, it would appear.
Well, if the dog had been tied to the bench, it would have made sense, but I don't think the dog was. But, all this was come out, and I want to think, what effect will this have on the family? And I think Suella Braverman's comments earlier on, and what we used to say, our thoughts and prayers are with the family. And I like to think that all people of goodwill, you, me, everybody, is now thinking of that family or the family of the person whose body has been found and offering what possible moral support and sympathy we can give. And maybe a period of silence, respectful, sympathetic silence is what's needed at the moment.
And if some of the people who have been obviously going to this area and trying to be detective sleuths would just stop all the social media. I think we need to learn this isn't really the right way to go about it. We need to give space for these things.
I think you're absolutely right. Now, this could be a turning point, because this has been happening more and more. I mean, I can think of so many recent cases. And if you look at the case of this couple and the baby who are supposed to be camping somewhere in Kent, people are tramping all over the place trying to... maybe that's a different case, I don't know. But in this particular one, where you have a specific location, the last thing anybody wants is hordes of rubberneckers coming up there with their sandwiches and their crisps and, and trying to get their faces in the paper.
Yeah.
It's not good.
It's not good at all.
Let's think about our family. Let's think particularly about the two kids. I mean, it's not going to be a good Easter for them. It's going to be a bad time, and we really need to be sending the most positive prayers and thoughts we can.
Well, and of course, the body hasn't been identified as Nicola Bulley.
Well, look, they'll know within a minute whether it's male or female. They'll know within 10 minutes the approximate age, and they will know very, very quickly from the dental records. So I understand a police officer will obviously say it's going to take days, but certainly I don't think it'll take that. I think it'll take hours.
Well, listen, Stephen, thank you so much for joining me. It's been good to talk to you. And, of course, our thoughts are with the family. And if you've just joined us as well, thank you so much for joining me for the programme today. Of course, we will keep you updated here on GB News with all the latest on the Nicola Bulley case. I will be back at 4 p.m. next Saturday. Don't forget you can catch up on the GB News app, or why not stream us live on YouTube. I will see you on Saturday at 4, and I'll leave you with the weather forecast. Have a good weekend. Have a good week.
Hello there, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office. I'm Jonathan Fortree. We do have a few sunny intervals around this afternoon, but the general theme for the next few days is a cloudy one. Frontal systems pushing their way across the northern half of the UK will bring a more unsettled picture here. Although we have high pressure in the south, the feed of southwesterly winds coming in off the Atlantic is going to slowly build the clouds here. So a few clear intervals for central southeastern areas of England throughout this evening, but the cloud tending to build as we move throughout the night. And some bits of drizzle are possible for Northern Ireland, parts of Western England and Wales. More extensive rain moving into Scotland. This will be accompanied by some particularly strong winds, up to 60, 70 mile an hour gusts are possible, so do just take care here. Underneath the cloud, though, it's going to be a mild night for all of us. Some places holding up around 10, 11 degrees Celsius. The rain across Scotland will tend to stall into Monday, so it could turn into a fairly damp and drizzly day here. For the north of that will be some sunny intervals for the Northern Isles, but it's going to remain particularly gusty across Shetland. For Northern Ireland, England and Wales, it will be a cloudy day. The odd break is possible, perhaps for parts of Herefordshire, Northumberland, so temperatures could reach 15, 16 degrees Celsius, but we'll retain that cloud as we move into the evening period. Again, some drizzle is possible. The rain in the north gradually shifting its way off more into parts of the Highlands and eventually clearing its way off to the Northern Isles as well. But the vast majority of us will again remain frost-free as we move into the start of Tuesday. Looking to be another fairly cloudy day for all of us. Again, the odd glimmer of sunshine might come through, but for most of us we will see fairly grey skies. Into Wednesday, we'll start to see this frontal system shift its way southeastwards across the country, and that will bring in a slight change to our weather. We start feeding in some northerly winds, and so it will turn brighter for a time, but we'll also see temperatures just falling off that bit more. Enjoy your day.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you